James Beecham, co-founder and CEO of data security company Alter, and welcome to another edition of Rabbit Hole Reviews. Today's topic is one that we've talked about before in the past with a slightly different twist to it, and that is around AI-generated code. So in previous rabbit holes, we've talked about some of the vulnerabilities that these coding systems are creating for enterprises. But today we're going to talk about intellectual property and copyright of this code. It's a problem that's starting to pop up in more and more places. I believe the latest statistic was something like 90% of large enterprises are generating the majority of their code now with AI coding tools. And that prompted me to try to understand a little bit more around the IP and the copywriting science. So if you're curious about some of the vulnerabilities associated with these AI systems for code generation, please check out previous reviews. I started and ended my rabbit hole actually around GitHub Copilot, as this was one of the first AI coding tools that's been out in the market. It's been out now for a number of years, something that we use internally at Alter as well. It's a very helpful tool. And you know what this problem that we're talking about today, IP or copyright, centers around is really around how these models were trained and what is the implication for open source licenses and how do you prove that a human had influence in the generation of this code. So the US PTO and the Supreme Court have all said that anything that's generated by AI without any human input or direction is not copyrightable or cannot be turned into intellectual property. So being able to prove that there is a human interaction within these systems is the first step that companies should take when they're looking at using AI-generated code within their applications. I think it's an interesting set of problems, and I do want to cover some of the basics around open source licensing to maybe highlight some of the concerns that are coming up. So just as a quick refresher, there's two main types of open source licenses, and I'll mention in just a minute why I'm talking about this. The first type is what is kind of known as a copyleft or an infectious license. This is a code license that is given to open source software in which any work that is derived from that software must also itself become open source or become available for people to use. This license was really popularized by Richard Stallman for the GNU project, GNU, which I learned is a macronym, which means it's an acronym inside of an acronym. GNU stands for GNU is not Unix. And it was this particular code base that really started getting the kind of copyleft or infectious type licenses out into the world, which have been very helpful, but could also put enterprises into a weird spot with having to open source any work that's derived from that software with those licenses. The other popular type of software license was called a permissive license. You can think of these as like MIT or Apache 2.0. These licenses allow you to derive work from the open source source code without having to then additionally open source your derived work in there. So you'll see a lot of enterprises leverage these permissive licenses with their projects as they're looking to build proprietary solutions for their customers. Now, going back to GitHub Copilot and some of the concerns around copyright and IP, how do we know if the Copilot is suggesting code that is licensed underneath the copyleft or the infectious? That is the main question. In a study that was done in looks like June of 21, and then updated in August of 2022, GitHub was able to prove that even a small percentage, I think they said about 1%, of the code blocks or code snippets that they suggest can be traced directly back to a source file or to a training file that it found on the internet. Now, 1% might not seem like a lot, but people have gone to court over smaller percentages than just 1%. So I think it's important to know that if GitHub is recognizing that there's a non-0% chance that these systems are suggesting code that is already copyrighted or is licensed with infectious licenses, that teams need to be aware of this. One suggestion that the GitHub team has is to use a set of filters that they provide for their copilots that lets you put into place some requirements on where these code snippets can come from. Now, the challenge is it's okay to take a single line of code, for example, or even a few lines of code from a source repository that has an infectious or a copyleft license, because the requirement for needing to maintain that license, that copyleft or that infectious license, is did your work end up being derived from that open source work? And that derived word is what everybody ends up fighting over. There was a great case for the Android operating system with Google against Oracle, where Oracle found that some of Google's products were derived from Oracle's open source copyleft libraries, but some were not. And this went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and there's a ton of reading that you can do about that. I think for companies to be frugal and thinking about how they're going to leverage these tools, really try to understand how your humans are using these solutions, and make sure that you have not only humans directing these copilots and directing these coding tools, but also to make sure that you have some semblance of filters in place to try to help those copilots prevent themselves from just suggesting entirely copied sections of code. Additionally, there are code scanning tools that have been out for a long time, even before these generative AI solutions, that help you understand if there are copied pieces of code. I'm thinking going back to the Stack Overflow days, where people used to just copy and paste code from Stack Overflow into their applications, and these tools would catch them in there. So if you're an engineering manager, a security engineering manager, and your team is using these AI-generated solutions, not only are there potentially vulnerabilities being suggested or put into your applications, as mentioned in a previous rabbit hole, but now you need to start thinking about copyright and intellectual property, and making sure that you're not accidentally infecting your code base with a copyleft or a infectious type license. So I hope that saves you all some time and gives you some talking points and some things to do with your business. Look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thank you very much.